I watched Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, so you don't have to. Now, I'm as high as your ex's standards right now. But Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is the greatest sequel ever made. One of those statements is a lie, and I'll tell you right now, I don't think it's the part about me being high. But I want to reiterate this and get this out of the way. It's not a bad movie by any means. However, if you were expecting this to upstage or recapture the same feeling as the original, sorry to disappoint you, but it just doesn't happen. I can assure you though, if you like the original movie, you'll be satisfied with the sequel. However, you probably won't put it on the same level in terms of quality. But there are certain elements worth talking about, so I'm going to dive into the nitty-gritty of this film. So as always, let's start with the positives. I appreciate they didn't try to emulate the same formula as the first movie and actually carved its own path with the sequel. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice dives into the lore of the universe that was set up in the first movie and explores the world of the afterlife. I also enjoyed how they used the same practical effects and visual styles as the first movie, which was obvious from the trailers. I was relieved they weren't going to try and replicate certain scenes and gags used in the original, but with half-baked CGI. I've said this before numerous times, but the CGI department is heavily overworked in the modern age, which leads to many visual effects looking not so great. So prioritizing practical effects over CGI, I think, was the right choice, and it does help capture the same magical feeling of the original to an extent. Another thing I love is how Beetlejuice has a bigger role in this film, and we actually get to see a lot more of his character. Michael Keaton f***ing killed it. He was a show stealer in the original, and it was criminal we didn't get to see more of him. Here, they gave him a lot more screen time without ever feeling forced or exhausting. The original movie came out over 35 years ago, and he was able to slip back into the role as if he never left. Without exaggeration, he was the best part about this film. It's also very creative how they portrayed the afterlife and introduced new characters like Astrid, played by Jenna Ortega, and William Dafoe's character, Wolf Jackson. This, combined with a remix of the original soundtrack and improved visual effects, it's all done really well. Overall, I can appreciate how the sequel was able to take the original story and blend it with old elements from the first movie without feeling outdated or needing to cater to the modern industry norms. With that out of the way, let's dive into the problems and criticisms I have about this film. There's a lot of plot threads and loose elements. They introduce a lot of things happening all at once, a lot of moving parts, to the point to where it becomes loose and hard to follow. I said the exact same thing about the Rick and Morty anime, but they have too many plots in a single story and not enough time to flush them out. That's probably the main criticism most people are going to have after watching this, how they set up all this really good stuff with the protagonist and villains just to speedrun the ending. It's an hour and 45 minutes, which by today's standards is short for a movie, and I definitely think it could have been longer, because just an additional 30 minutes could have really made a difference in how these plot threads got resolved that's satisfying to the audience. For example, William Dafoe's character, Wolf Jackson. Loved the character, not so much his plot. So he's basically this police officer in the afterlife that's investigating a series of murders, and the way he handles them is like a middle school safety patrol. He starts to piece things together through his investigation, and in the end, it just doesn't matter. It's like Indiana Jones' contribution in Raiders of the Lost Ark. I know that's a very touching subject to some, but in short, if you remove Wolf Jackson from Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, the movie will still end the exact same way. Neither him or his plot thread is integral to the overall story. It's the same thing with Monica Bellucci's character Dolores, who's this big bad soul sucker in the afterlife. Immediately, she's introduced as this big bad, the catalyst for everything that's about to go forward, and what happens in the end is nothing. A literal nothing burger. She contributes a little bit of lore to Beetlejuice's backstory, but she's not the one doing it. Beetlejuice is the one exposition dumping his past relationship to her character. Even if you remove every scene she's in, it still plays out the exact same way. I actually have a bit of a conspiracy theory that they use these plot threads as a means to extend the runtime, while also using it as an opportunity to have these A-list actors in the film. Likewise, I also theorize nobody except Tim Burton knew these actors were in the movie. It really feels like William Dafoe and Monica Bellucci just showed up on set one day and he gave them a role, because for the most part, their characters are just kind of doing their own thing. In fact, I don't even think Monica Bellucci's character interacted with, shared a scene with, or was in the same space as any of the main characters except for the last 5 minutes where she's killed off instantly. Other than that, she's basically doing a bunch of side quests throughout this movie. Let's compare this to Beetlejuice. So, he's brought back because of a death in the family, which leads to Lydia returning to the old ghost house, where he uses it as an opportunity to capitalize for his own malicion. Some other shit happens, which leads to them needing Beetlejuice's help and drives the whole narrative from there. The situation they found themselves in would have happened regardless of if Monica Bellucci's character was present or not. While I'm on the subject, I wasn't as thrilled for the return of Lydia as I was Beetlejuice. While Michael Keaton was able to reprise the role better than ever, it felt like Winona Ryder was playing an entirely different character. It wasn't bad by any means, it just felt like I was watching her play Joyce Byers, but goth. Other than the looks, I just didn't get the same feel for her character personality-wise at all. Like I said, I'm glad they didn't just emulate the original film, but this movie was too complicated. Beetlejuice is a simple film. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is so convoluted, it just becomes homework trying to piece everything together, like with Jenna Ortega's plot. Her character and love story is integral to the overall narrative. However, it gets resolved in 10 seconds. I could jerk off longer than the time it took to resolve this plot thread, which had a ton of build-up and backstory leading up to it. Giving it my final thoughts. To reiterate, it's not a bad movie by any means, though I think the reviews are pretty accurate. A 77 from Rotten Tomatoes is what I'd also give it. If you liked Beetlejuice, then I think you'll like the sequel. However, if you didn't like the original, then this movie just might not be for you. I enjoyed how they implemented the same styles as the original film with a new narrative, but not so much when they tried to replicate it one-to-one. Cause there were a couple of scenes where they tried to do something the original did, and it failed harder than me in my Intro to Greek Latin course. There are some iconic moments in Beetlejuice that they tried again in the sequel, and they just didn't hit the same way, in my opinion. Ultimately though, it's a decent film and I wasn't bored while watching it, far from it. I just think they rushed the integral plots and needed more time to give it a satisfying conclusion. Cause I truly enjoyed watching the movie, but it ended so abruptly that I felt like I got cock-blocked. I was expecting it to go on a bit longer, only to have everything end instantly. So I definitely think they should have extended the film in order to really tie everything together in a satisfying way, but it wasn't a waste of time. And at the very least, it's certainly better than any of the horror movies we've had come out this year. So I'll give Beetlejuice Beetlejuice that dub. Anyways, I just wanted to talk about this in case any of y'all were pondering whether or not the film's worth watching. If you're a fan of the franchise or horror in general, go and see it. You'll have a good time until it ends. That's really about it. So,